Yo, what's going on everybody? So today I'm going to be giving you guys the review for Boruto episode 129, and yes, I'm aware that the new Boruto manga chapter is also going to be coming out later today, so I will have the review for the Boruto manga chapter as well later on today. So with that being said, episode 129, I gotta say, man, I'm actually even more intrigued than I was to begin with, because one of the things that this episode did is it told us that when it comes to time travel, that the Naruto universe is actually going to be borrowing a couple of different time travel theories. So, you know, one thing that I theorized later last week was that they're going to be borrowing more so from the Dragon Ball type of timeline, mainly because of Kishimoto and Kodachi's influences with the Dragon Ball series. And it doesn't look like that's the case. It doesn't look like we're going to have a parallel universe. It's a little too early to say whether or not that's the case, but the time travel tool that they stole from Urashiki, the turtle, I cannot remember the turtle's name at this time, but the turtle explains to them that there's a chance that by interacting with the past versions of themselves or people that they're close to, in the case of Boruto, there's a chance that the timeline can change and that things can be affected. And I like how Sasuke takes the mature approach in this. So what Sasuke essentially does is Sasuke says, okay, well, there's even a 10% chance that things can end up for the worst. So what I'll do is I'll try and play the background. I'll watch things from a distance. And I think that that's the smart approach. And I also think that Sasuke, by doing that, I think that we're seeing more of his character, but also, let's be real for a second. Sasuke understands that this is a moment of shame for him, because one of the things I predicted, which was Boruto's gonna learn that Sasuke deserted the village. I think that this is a moment of shame for Sasuke because he's having to see the fallout of when he left the village and all the things that he missed after effect. Now, Tsunade says that yesterday, a Genin deserted the village. I know a lot of people are only familiar with the anime continuity, so I'm gonna borrow from the Naruto manga because how things played out in the anime is slightly different than in the manga. So in the anime, it makes it appear as if there was this long period of time that exists between Naruto leaving with Jiraiya to train in the village. Like literally, Naruto's in the hospital for less than a day. Neji and the rest of them, they got operated on for less than a day. And because I know there are going to be some people who bring up the fact that the timeline should be messed up, I'm just going to point something out to you. So when you read the manga, when specifically you go to chapter 238, we find out that after Jiraiya's told Naruto that he is going to train him, after that happens, you have this moment where Tsunade is watching Sakura as Sakura's training. And she says that 3 months have passed. Tsunade has a internal monologue and says she can't believe that Sakura's come so far in 3 months and that she's progressing even faster than Shizune did. So once again, the timeline, it isn't messed up. It's one of those things where you have to be familiar with both the anime continuity and the manga continuity. While the Naruto and Naruto Shippuden anime did adapt the manga, it did take some creative liberties and there are some small changes. And what the Boruto anime does is it borrows information from both continuities. So you have to be well versed in both of those things, otherwise they're gonna slip stuff in there and it's gonna go completely over your head. So I hope that at least will clear up some of the misinformation that is likely gonna be getting spread out there by a few people. So one of the things I like about them actually starting off in this period right before Naruto goes to train with Jiraiya is that we're actually seeing what happens on the early portion of Naruto's training quest with Jiraiya. So essentially you have that period where Naruto is handling his last affairs, grabbing his things, and he's gonna run off with Jiraiya on the training. But we've already seen a couple of wrinkle effects. We're already seeing some small changes just because of Boruto being inside of the village. And I like how Boruto's first introduction to Naruto comes right after Sasuke tells this dude, like, yo, I need you to be careful. I need you not to say or do anything that can give away your true identity. And I know somebody out there was saying, I just hope Boruto says, like, Naruto, you're my father. That way Boruto can never be born. I know somebody was waiting on something like that. But this has real ramifications. The fact that they're mixing various time travel laws while borrowing on some of the cliches, there is a bit bit of conflict. There is a bit of tension there because Boruto has to walk a very fine line. Sasuke's tasking him with never leaving Naruto's side, which in a way is actually low-key smart outside of their mannerisms, which Sakura picks on right away. So Sakura catches it. Somebody like Shikamaru is going to put the pieces together and realize that something's not right. But the thing is if Boruto interacts with Naruto and some of the people from the Konoha 11, they have no idea who Boruto is. And the concept of time travel is so out there that while someone like Shikamaru might consider it, he's so logical that it might be one of those things where he brushes that to the side. Whereas Sasuke, if you look at Sasuke, you can clearly tell that that is Sasuke. He's a little older. He's a lot older. Sasuke right now is 18 years older than he was when he was a 12 going on 13-year-old who left the village. So I think that this is interesting. That Tsunade sees him and for a moment she pauses. She pauses for a brief moment. And so I don't know if maybe in that moment that the concept of time travel definitely was something that crossed her mind. When you look at Jiraiya, the same thing. Jiraiya's like, oh yeah, kid, I'm gonna go off and continue my research. Now, while that is believable, I do want to say this much. Jiraiya is also someone who's highly observant. He's someone who's highly observant, and I wouldn't put it past Jiraiya. Yeah, he might be peeping, but the presence of a kid who can use the sexy jutsu, the presence of an older gentleman who's clearly hiding himself, I think that Jiraiya is also watching things from the shadows as well. Like, I think that Jiraiya is trusting in Naruto to handle the early work, but at some point, Jiraiya is going to pop back up, and I do believe it's going to be revealed that Jiraiya's been watching stuff as well. So, I mean, this is interesting. This is really interesting. Like, if you go back to the early parts of Naruto, Jiraiya is peeping, but at the same time he's thinking about the fact that he is going to be approached to be the 5th Hokage, and he's coming up with a plan to get Tsunade and to have the elders sign off on Tsunade being the 5th Hokage. Like, Jiraiya, don't let this fool you. Jiraiya is also scheming something up. So that's a character we have to keep our eye on. And I like the fact that Sasuke is probably aware of this, and so now Sasuke is also playing things safe by watching things from a distance. Now, I'll get to the whole moment where Boruto and Naruto are bonding in a second, because I actually want to cap off the review with that, but I want to touch on a couple other things I thought was pretty interesting. So I like the idea that Boruto's interactions with Jiraiya is essentially him learning that Jiraiya was a huge peeping Tom, and so Boruto's looking at him, he's like, was this guy really that great? And even Sasuke says, like, no, I think that's him. I think, like, Sasuke is the same thing, because, you know, Sasuke, if I'm not mistaken, in the manga, Sasuke never interacted with Jiraiya. I don't know if maybe there was some stuff in the anime that was mixed in, but in the manga, Sasuke never interacted with him. So I like that this is officially the first time that we have Sasuke interacting with Jiraiya, and it's one of those things, he's like, wait, Tsunade I can see being very powerful. Orochimaru, I trained with this dude, played hide the snake with this dude for 3 years, and I totally know that Orochimaru is strong, but when it comes to this dude, what the hell is this goofy guy? So I mean, I like that. I really like that aspect of what we're actually seeing on there, just that fan service perspective of it. Now, the other thing that I also enjoyed was the fact that, you know, tooting my own horn for a second, you know, I told you guys in a later video, like probably a few months ago, I told you guys to say, yeah, Boruto knows the sexy jutsu. It's not going to be something that we're going to see for a while. And I explained to you that in the novelization for Boruto the movie, that Boruto refers to it as being Konohamaru Sensei's sexy jutsu, and that he uses it to escape after Konohamaru accidentally blows up that house in the beginning of the events of Boruto the movie. And that's the whole reason why Naruto's getting onto him in the Hokage office. It isn't because they failed their mission, but it's because Boruto uses a jutsu like that. That's why Naruto's scolding him. And in the Boruto manga, Boruto uses the sexy jutsu. I'm not going to spoil the circumstances for it, but I had quite a few of you guys telling me that I didn't know what I was talking about on that, and that Boruto wouldn't use a jutsu like that he's too mature to use it. That's the furthest thing from the truth. And I like how the anime is now showing us that Boruto knows sexy jutsu, and Boruto, you do see some of that maturity there. So essentially when Naruto starts getting jealous and they start asking how he knows a jutsu like that, he's basically saying, like, look, it's just like my sensei said, you know, we're travelers, we have to keep people entertained, don't think anything twice of this. Now, the other thing I found interesting about Boruto being in this part of the timeline is that he's seeing just how different things were, because a Genin deserts the village. Granted, a very important Genin, but still, a Genin deserts the village, and all of a sudden, while the people are going through doing their everyday life, the village is still on high alert. The village is still essentially on lockdown. This is a different Konoha than Boruto's used to. The atmosphere is a bit different, because you got to remember, during this time, the five great nations weren't getting along. They weren't getting along. They're still at each other's throats. They're still doing things to undermine one another. So that's gonna be another aspect of the story that Boruto's gonna have to adjust to, just in the same way that he sees the Ichiraku ramen shop and he sees its very humble beginnings. And so I like that aspect of it there, because now you get to fully appreciate just everything that that shop had to do in order to become what it is now. And when Boruto says, well, I want to get a Thunder Burger, Sasuke tells him that doesn't exist in this part of the timeline. So I like that, you know, Boruto's getting a humble understanding of just how good he has it. Boruto meeting Naruto. Now, I gotta be real with you for a second, okay? So I did think it was pretty funny just seeing how these characters are, you know, having the same mannerisms, and they're both saying Dadabayo, but you know, if you listen kind of close to Boruto, he's saying Dadabasa, and so you're seeing that their verbal tics are pretty similar, but their mannerisms are slightly different, but they're also damn near mirroring each other. You see how people like Sakura are picking up on it, and they're a little bit confused, but they're just kind of rolling with it. That's something that, again, if Boruto interacts too much, if Boruto slips up, if he doesn't keep his wits about him, you could see the timeline changing. Like when they come back, you know, you could see a scenario where Tenten becomes the 8th Hokage, Naruto gets divorced from Hinata, and Hinata's now a single mother. And I mean, it's one of those things you have to look at. Those are things that are possible if Boruto isn't careful. If Boruto messes up the timeline, which, I mean, there's a chance that he could. Naruto could divorce Hinata. I mean, this is something you have to look at, man. But what I like about this, man, I can't even keep the trolling straight, man. 10-10 for 8th Hokage. Some of you guys actually believe that shit. Oh man, yo, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. So anyway, man, so what I gotta say though is, when Boruto goes into Naruto's house, Boruto's like, you live alone? And it's like, yo, newsflash, kid, your dad was an orphan. That's something Hinata was trying to tell you during the versus Momoshiki arc. And when Boruto sees that only thing Naruto has is ramen, in that moment, you know, Boruto recalls how Naruto loved eating ramen, but it's also one of those things where when you look at it, ramen is a very cheap meal. Naruto's an orphan. Yeah, he gets money from his missions, but Naruto also has to pay rent at this point. So I mean, it's one of those things where Boruto's understanding that Naruto's eating ramen out of necessity as well, isn't just because it's his favorite meal. So I like seeing that. I like seeing how Boruto's looking around Naruto's very rundown apartment, and Boruto realizes just how good he has it. Now, I will say this as a bit of a nitpick. I've never been a fan of the direction that the anime went when it came to the relationship with Naruto and Boruto. I'm not one of those people saying, oh, Boruto doesn't suck the ramen noodle doodle of Naruto. It isn't that. It isn't that. I'm totally okay with that, okay? I've said that in the past. But where I've had an issue is once we got to the versus Momoshiki arc, all that noise about Boruto having issues with his dad, all that noise should have been killed. Like when you look at the Boruto movie, when you look at the versus Momoshiki arc in the manga, Naruto and Boruto make up, and then from there they have a few squabbles, but for the most part there's an understanding that they're working to repair the relationship. Whereas in the anime, every now and then you get a reminder of that, but you, for the most part, you still get Boruto acting like a spoiled brat. You still get Boruto who is holding Naruto, working so much over his head. I mean, it's one of those things where it's just like, okay, I get it, daddy wasn't there, suck it up. I've never been a fan of how they've handled that. So I like the fact that they're using this arc as an opportunity to have Boruto understand just why Naruto works the way that he does. And when kid Naruto is talking to Boruto saying like, that's pretty cool, you got a family, you seem really happy when you talk about your family. I don't have a family. and you can tell Naruto's genuinely interested just to learn what that's like. And when Boruto catches on to it, he says in a very soft voice, and if you pay attention to his inflection, the voice actor for the scene nailed it, because you can tell that Boruto's genuinely hurt that he was even thinking those negative thoughts about his fathers, and almost to a point where when he says like, yeah, I don't hate him, it's one of those things where he's like, damn, I didn't realize how good I had it. So I like that the anime is taking this opportunity to give us some growth with Boruto. Now it's gonna be very interesting since they're playing with a few different time travel rules. It's gonna be very interesting that Urashiki is going to arrive in the timeline a few days later. So we don't know whether or not the Ganin are assimilating in this part of the timeline in the next episode because Urashiki's been spotted or there's rumblings. We don't know whether or not that's the case. Again, there exists the possibility there might be a separate timeline, but there also exists a possibility that this is going to be part of a new canon because of their interactions that are happening in this part of the timeline. So I mean, this is going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see how they do it. It's a little too early for us to fully grasp how they're going to handle time travel. We have a rough understanding now, but it's going to be very interesting to see what gets done. But I like the fact that one of the huge time travel cliches where if you bump into the past version of yourself, or if you bump into your father from the past, that there's a chance that you'll never be born. I like the fact that they're not going that route. So they are opening the door for us to see them take some creative liberties with it. So my episode question to you guys is, what are your personal thoughts about that moment when Boruto is looking at Naruto and Naruto's telling him like he thinks it's cool that Boruto has a family and that Naruto has that sad expression on his face? Do you think that this is the right way for the anime to try and close that gap between father and son? Let me know down in the comment section below. And just as a reminder, the chapter review, if the chapter does come out today like we're expecting, I will have the chapter review as well. But as always, guys, if you like anything I had to say, don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Have an awesome day, guys.